Rich officials tried to destroy my fund to help the poor. I was hit by a car. The fund was burned down. The volunteers were intimidated. But I survived and told the UN. Don't forget to subscribe. What city are you from? Write in the comments. I remember the exact color of the walls in the shelter. The kind of green that tried too hard to pretend it was calming. It wasn't. It was chipped, dull, and always cold to the touch, like metal on your skin in the winter. That shade of green taught me early on that comfort could be a lie painted over concrete. I don't remember my mother's voice, not really, just a sound, a shape, maybe a laugh in a dream. She died when I was 6, but even before that, she had already disappeared in so many ways. Drugs took her body. Poverty took her dignity. No one ever came to claim me after she left. I was placed in a group home in Eastbridge, an aging building that once might have been a school. I always imagined the ceilings used to echo with children's laughter, but by the time I arrived, it echoed only with yelling and broken furniture being slammed into walls. I had a metal bed frame that screeched when I moved. The mattress was so thin, I could feel the wire beneath my spine. The nights were the worst. Hunger was one thing. I could drink water and ignore it. But the quiet was unbearable. Not because it was peaceful. It was the kind of silence that screamed. You lay there and waited for it, for the sounds, the keys jangling, the heavy footsteps, the door creaking open. Some girls fought back. Others didn't. I learned quickly not to cry. Crying marked you, made you soft. I watched a girl once, Clarissa. She was maybe 9. She cried every night for her mama. 3 weeks in, her hair was gone in patches and she no longer spoke. She wasn't taken away. She simply stopped existing in a way I could understand. I kept my eyes open when I slept. I learned to fight. I stole food, lied about my age, and once shoved a girl twice my size down the stairs just to get my spot in line for second-hand shoes. I'm not proud of it, but pride wasn't something we could afford. I was 13 when I realized no one was coming. Not a mother, not a father, not even a social worker who gave a damn. The paperwork said my father was incarcerated. No one knew which prison, and I stopped wondering if I looked like him. But then it happened. The letter came on a Tuesday. I remember because the lady who brought it in, the front desk volunteer with the limp and a smoker's cough, tossed it at me and said, "Don't get excited. It's probably a mistake." She was wrong. The envelope had my name on it in real ink. Inside was a scholarship, full tuition to St. Eloise Preparatory Academy, books, uniform, lunch plan, everything. There was no signature, just a line. Let this be the beginning. I thought it was a prank, a setup, a cruel game, but the paperwork was real. The school was real, and 2 weeks later, I stood at the iron gates of a campus that smelled like cut grass and lavender soap. Girls with shiny ponytails and perfect teeth looked at me like I was dirt swept in from the street. I didn't care. I kept my head down, studied harder than anyone. I got straight A's, read late into the night with a flashlight under the covers, and pretended not to hear the girls whisper "charity case" when I walked by. The teachers liked me. Some were curious, some uncomfortable, but none could deny the work. I earned everything, every single point. And somewhere in that silence between lectures and long walks back to my dorm, I promised myself something. I would become the kind of woman I had needed when I was a child. It took time. College was barely within reach, but I made it work. I got a part-time job shelving books and another cleaning hospital bathrooms at night. I learned how to smile politely to people who thought my story was inspiring. I never told the full truth. No one wants to hear the full truth. They want grit with a glossy ending. I didn't wait for the glossy ending. I made my own beginning. The first center I opened wasn't a real center. It was a basement in a condemned building 2 blocks from the 5th Street Bridge. It smelled like mold and old cigarettes, but I cleaned it, scrubbed it until my hands cracked, hauled in blankets, medical kits, cans of formula. I didn't have a sign, just a handwritten paper in the window. Help available, no questions asked. The first person who came was a mother with a toddler clinging to her neck. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her shirt was inside out, and her shoes didn't match. She was starving. The baby was worse, quiet, eyes too big for her face. I gave them both soup, let them sleep. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew what it meant to need someone and find nobody. That was the beginning. Word spread. No press, no TV, no donors. Just people helping people. An old man from the shelter gave me cans. A nurse from the night shift at County General dropped off diapers. Even a bus driver I didn't know gave me $10 once and said, "Don't stop." They all knew. They had been there. They had waited in those same emergency room chairs, prayed for housing, begged for food stamps, smiled through their teeth during job interviews, knowing they wouldn't get a call back. I didn't call it a charity. I didn't call it a mission. It was survival turned inside out. There was no ceremony, no ribbon cutting, but I'll never forget the moment I realized we were making a dent. It was a Tuesday again. Maybe that's just my lucky day. A woman ran in, sobbing, carrying a newborn wrapped in a ragged towel. She had walked 6 miles from another district because she heard there was a place where they didn't ask for papers or IDs or insurance. The baby was dehydrated, barely breathing. I called every number I knew. A nurse from a previous shift showed up in 30 minutes. We saved that baby. His name was Cyrus. That was the day I started writing the stories down, not for the media, for me. So I'd remember that even when it got too heavy to breathe, something real had happened here. Life had returned to a body that might have been lost. I needed to remember that because I could feel the tide shifting. People were noticing, not the ones who helped, the ones who watched. Men in press suits, officials with polite smiles and cold eyes. City inspectors I'd never met before showed up with clipboards and concerns. Property owners called about leases they'd never cared to enforce. A food distributor suddenly lost a shipment. I didn't panic, not yet. I thought maybe it was coincidence. It wasn't. The cracks were starting to form, not in my resolve, in the ground beneath me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I had seen too much. I knew too much. I remembered what it felt like to sit in a room where no one called your name. I wouldn't let anyone disappear again. They'd have to come through me first. And something deep inside me, older than fear, older than hope, whispered that maybe, just maybe, that was the point all along. Growth, I've learned, doesn't feel like success. It feels like fear disguised as momentum. We were growing. I could feel it in the pulse of the city, in the way people looked at our center now, not with pity, but with expectation. They were starting to believe we were real. That belief was sacred and terrifying. We opened a second space 6 months after Cyrus was saved. This time, it wasn't a basement. It was a condemned row house off Harold Street, once a drug den, now scraped clean and patched together with community labor. Teen boys who used to run packages through the alley came by with toolboxes. One man, Lorenzo, painted all 4 rooms with supplies he bought using his last paycheck from a job that laid him off 2 days later. We didn't have funds. We had faith. I named the space the second door, not because it was our second location, but because that's what I wanted to be for people. The door they found after the first one slammed shut. We gave out food, basic medicine, formula, thermal blankets. We reconnected runaway teens with safe places. Nothing grand. No banners, no donor galas, just grit and hands and broken people helping other broken people carry the weight. And then, the silence changed. Not the one I slept in, that had long become my companion. No, this was a silence with eyes. The kind you feel watching you when your back is turned. Cars idling a little too long across the street. Men in collared shirts pretending to check their phones. A woman who took notes during her donation tour and asked more about how we tracked our inventory than how we treated infants with pneumonia. It got louder when a news piece aired on local access TV. I hadn't wanted it, but a volunteer recorded our daily routine and sent it to her friend, a producer. They ran a 5-minute segment, called us a miracle in the cracks of the city. The phones rang off the hook for a week. The mailroom overflowed with socks, food, even hand-knitted baby blankets. But also letters from lawyers, demands for building permits, zoning violations, inquiries into our licensing, our fire safety clearance, requests for financial records we didn't even know we were supposed to have. One morning, I arrived to find a city inspector locking the front door with an orange sticker that read, "Facility closed until further notice." No one had warned me. Inside were 5 mothers with newborns and a diabetic man sleeping on a cot. The press didn't cover that. I filed appeals, called everyone, waited in lobbies for hours just to be told the official I needed to see was unavailable. We opened back up a week later, illegally, with the help of a retired nurse who knew how to navigate around regulation loopholes. We moved quietly, told people to enter from the back, kept the lights dim. I didn't sleep that week, not from fear, from rage. I understood then. We weren't just being inconvenienced, we were being silenced. The turning point came in the form of a meeting. I never wanted to go, but they were persistent. A foundation, the Graybridge Initiative, sent a formal invitation. They were well known in elite philanthropic circles, plastered on banners at expensive fundraisers. Their slogan was Precision Compassion. It already made my skin crawl. I wore the only decent blazer I owned, pressed the sleeves flat with my hands while I sat in their chrome office. A man named Nolan Gray greeted me with a handshake firm enough to bruise. He had the kind of face that smiled too fast and eyes that never did. He praised my work, called me visionary, said I had disrupted the urban aid landscape. Then came the offer. $3 million. Immediate. No fundraising required. Full partnership with Graybridge. But we do require some adjustments, he said, almost offhand. Adjustments. No undocumented clients. We'll need bi-weekly reporting, and we ask that you focus your services on food and maternal care only. Housing, infrastructure, legal aid, those should be left to our more specialized partners. In other words, feed them, don't free them. Smile, don't speak. I declined, politely but firmly. My voice didn't shake. I thanked him for the offer, told him my organization would remain independent. He nodded slowly, like a man watching a child refuse dessert. "We hope you reconsider. You've built something rare," he said. "It would be a shame to see it collapse under the weight of ambition." I left that office feeling cold and watched. 2 days later, we lost our largest shipment of medical supplies. The distributor apologized, said the warehouse misplaced the pallet. The week after, the building owner of the second door gave us a 14-day eviction notice citing neighborhood redevelopment. I found out the property had quietly been purchased by a shell company, one linked to a Graybridge subsidiary. Coincidence? I wasn't sure, but I was beginning to see the outline. The next blow came harder. It was raining. One of the volunteers, Javi, had parked the supply van by the back alley. We were unloading crates when we smelled something sharp. Chemical. Unmistakable. A moment later, flames kissed the roof. The fire was fast. Too fast. Accelerants were found in the debris. Javi suffered burns on his hands trying to pull out a mother and her 2 sons. They made it out. He barely did. The fire department said it looked suspicious, but no investigation followed. We were back to square one, and this time the press didn't come. Not even the community blogs. It was as if someone had pressed mute. I sat on the curb that night, soaked, watching embers float into the black sky. My hands shook, not from cold, but from something deeper. My mind went back to the basement where I grew up, the shelter that forgot I existed, the nights where I would press my palms over my ears and tell myself stories to survive. I wasn't afraid. I was furious. But a crack had formed. What if I had gone too far? What if this was all a fantasy? That I could do this without them? That I could outpace systems that had crushed generations? What if I had failed the people who believed in me? I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. But I wrote. For the first time in months, I opened my notebook and wrote, "If I am being watched, let them see everything. Let them see the fury and the faith. Let them see a girl who grew up invisible and now refuses to vanish." That night, I received a call from Olivia. She was a nurse I'd met early on, a woman in her 60s, with hands that had delivered more babies than I'd ever held. She said she heard what happened. She said she was coming. She showed up the next morning with a cart full of medical supplies and a thermos of soup. "They're scared of you," she said, while helping dress Javi's wounds. "Not because you're loud, because you're real. You didn't ask for permission, and now they don't know how to erase you." I didn't cry. I couldn't afford to. Instead, I nodded and breathed and rose. They wanted me gone, but they'd have to try harder, because I had work to do, and I had just received an invitation, an email buried in my inbox, sent from Geneva, an international summit, an open call for grassroots leaders in global public health. Someone had submitted my name. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the delete button, but I didn't delete it. Instead, I whispered to myself, if they want me silent, maybe it's time I speak where the world is forced to listen. I don't remember the moment of impact, not really. Just the headlights. Too quiet. No screeching tires. Just the sudden weight of metal splitting darkness. And then a sound. Bone against glass, maybe. Or soul against fate. Then cold. Then pain. I came back to myself in pieces. The ceiling above me was white, humming faintly with fluorescent light. The kind of light that made you feel like nothing human ever touched this place. I couldn't move my right leg. My mouth tasted like metal and gauze. My ears throbbed with a slow beep. Somewhere beyond the blur, I heard someone whispering my name. I thought it might be God, or maybe my mother, until I realized it was Olivia. She sat by my side, hunched forward, hands wrapped around a paper cup she didn't drink from. Her face looked older than the last time I'd seen it, more tired, less patient. She didn't speak right away, just nodded when I opened my eyes. "You're lucky," she said finally, without joy. "If the car had hit you 2 inches to the left, your lungs would have collapsed. You wouldn't be here." I didn't ask what happened. I knew. It hadn't been a robbery, not an accident. No one had taken my bag. No one had even stopped. I was walking home from a meeting with a city clerk about permits for the new shelter site. There were no warnings, no words, just silence, speed, and steel. "They're trying to kill you," Olivia said. She didn't say it dramatically, not like a movie. She said it like a fact, like gravity. I didn't argue. I couldn't. My leg was broken in 2 places. 3 ribs cracked, a concussion, 24 stitches across my thigh. But none of that hurt as much as what came after. The news, not headlines. I didn't expect those. But the one article that made it out was worse than silence. It painted the event as part of a possible gang altercation. Described me as a community worker known to operate in areas of high criminal activity. The paper didn't say my name until paragraph 5, didn't mention my work. Just a young woman found injured in what officials suggest may be a hit and run related to local disputes. The rest of the world moved on. So did the people I thought were with us. Our biggest donor, a small tech company run by a man who once called me the future, issued a quiet statement withdrawing support due to operational uncertainty. Our landlord refused to extend our lease. Several volunteers stopped showing up. They didn't call. I didn't blame them. No one wants to stand near a target, especially when that target bleeds in public. I spent 8 days in that hospital bed. Olivia slept in a chair beside me most nights. On the 5th day, she brought me my old spiral notebook. I hadn't written in it since the fire. I stared at the cover for hours before touching it. I thought about Javi's hands, about the mothers who ran barefoot through the street with infants pressed to their chest, about the smell of burning plaster, about the look in Nolan Gray's eyes when I said no. I thought about the man who hit me. Did he feel proud? Was he paid well? Did he look back? I didn't cry. Not then. Crying would have been too soft. What I felt wasn't grief. It was steel, quiet and cold and absolute. I opened the notebook and wrote only one sentence. They can erase my name, but not what I've seen. On the 9th day, I checked myself out early. The doctors protested, said I needed rest. They didn't understand. I couldn't rest. Rest was a privilege bought with the safety I no longer had. My body was weak, but my purpose had never been clearer. We had no building, now, no office. Most of our supplies were gone, but people still found us. Word spread. The center wasn't a place anymore. It was a name, a movement, a whisper on the wind that maybe help still existed somewhere in this city. We met in parking lots, in the basements of churches, sometimes just on corners, passing thermoses and medicine under flickering streetlights. It wasn't legal, it wasn't safe, but it was alive. And in the middle of all this, a message arrived. Geneva. The email I had ignored now sat blinking in my inbox with a new subject line. Confirmed, speaker slot reserved, Public Health and Grassroots Response Panel. The summit was real. The invitation was official. Someone, I still don't know who, had nominated me. The event was 3 weeks away, all expenses covered. At first, I stared at the screen like it was in another language. Then I laughed. Not from joy, from disbelief. They had tried to kill me, and now someone wanted me to speak on a stage in front of the world? Who would listen to me? Who would care? I nearly deleted the email. Then Olivia came in. She glanced at the screen and narrowed her eyes. You going? I shrugged. What's the point? A few Swiss suits clap politely while I talk about children dying in moldy basements? Then what? She didn't argue, just walked over to the table and placed a folded piece of paper in front of me. It was a photo. From years ago, one I'd never seen. A girl, maybe 10, sitting on the steps of a church, her knees scraped, her face stiff, a baby wrapped in a shirt, clinging to her. That's me, Olivia said quietly, back when I thought nobody in the world saw me. I looked up. You saw me, she said. You didn't blink, and you didn't walk away. That night, I opened my notebook again, wrote a different line. If the world insists on turning away, then I will speak loud enough to echo behind them. A few days before the flight, another envelope arrived at the door of Olivia's home, where I was recovering. No return address. Just my name in block letters. Inside, one sentence printed on plain white paper. If you speak, you won't come back. I didn't show it to Olivia. I didn't tell anyone. I packed my bag that night, folded the photo she gave me, and placed it between my clothes like armor. They could burn my buildings, silence my allies, paint me as a criminal, break my bones. But they would not have the last word, and I knew, deep in the marrow of who I had become, that I hadn't survived all this just to die in silence. I didn't know what I would say. I only knew I would say it. And I would say it so clearly that no one, no matter how rich, how powerful, how protected, could pretend they didn't hear. Geneva was colder than I expected. Not the weather, though it was early spring and the sky seemed made of silver. It was the kind of cold that came from marble floors and too much silence, from people who wore compassion like a tailored suit and folded it neatly at night. The summit was held in a glass building that towered like a monument to good intentions. Everything shone. Polished steel, pressed suits, perfect posture. There were translators in booths and name cards in 7 languages. I had never felt smaller. I had never felt more seen and more ignored at the same time. I arrived in a wheelchair. The leg wasn't healing right, and painkillers made me dizzy, so I stopped taking them. My hands trembled as I signed in. A woman handed me a badge. It had my name. No title, just Community Worker USA. Not founder, not director, not survivor. Just that. Fine. Let them underestimate me. They always did. The room was half full when I rolled in. Delegates from global health organizations, academics from universities I could barely pronounce, policymakers with crisp ties and crisper smiles. They didn't look at me, not with malice, with polite disinterest, as if I were the technician, not the speaker. The man before me on the panel wore a navy suit that probably cost more than the yearly rent of my first shelter. He talked about metrics, data optimization, technological frameworks for scalable aid. The crowd nodded along, jotting notes, eyes half-lidded. When the moderator called my name, it took her an extra second to find the right pronunciation. I rolled forward, took the microphone, and let silence settle. I didn't speak immediately. I let the quiet breathe. Let them look. Let them feel the discomfort of waiting for something they weren't prepared to hear. Then I said it. I'm not here to present data. They looked up. I'm here to tell you what happens when no one does. I told them about the mothers. The girl who gave birth on a tarp in a parking lot because the clinic turned her away. The child with infected burns because the only hospital closed its pediatric wing to cut costs. The grandmother who used her insulin money to buy baby formula for her daughter's newborn. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize. I spoke plainly, clearly, like I would to someone standing in line for soup. Because the truth doesn't need embroidery. It just needs to be told. I saw their faces change, slowly, one by one. Eyes sharpening, bodies leaning forward, some scribbled, some stopped pretending to take notes and just listened. I told them about Cyrus, the infant we saved from dehydration with 3 bottles of donated milk and a nurse who hadn't slept in 30 hours. I told them about the building that burned, about Javi's hands, about the man who never stopped the car. I didn't name the corporations. I didn't have to. They knew. I told them how help had turned into currency, how charity had become branding, how entire cities were being carved into PR opportunities for companies that had never walked their streets, how people like me, like us, were being erased under the banner of strategic alignment. I ended with this. You don't have to remember my name. Most people don't. But remember this. Every time you decide where the money goes, where the aid flows, where the voices get cut from the room, you are not managing numbers. You are deciding who gets to live. Silence. Longer than I expected. Then one clap, then another. Then the room stood. Not all of them. Not the polished man from the pharmaceutical panel, not the delegate who checked his phone halfway through my story, but enough. Enough to know the words landed somewhere that couldn't be undone. Afterwards, a woman from an NGO handed me her card and whispered, "We've been waiting for someone to say it." A journalist asked for an interview. I declined. A minister from a West African nation hugged me without a word. Back in my room that night, I didn't sleep. Not from adrenaline, not from fear. From weight, the weight of being heard. Because now I knew what I said couldn't be unsaid. And they knew. The email came the next morning. A single sentence from an encrypted address. You think applause will save you? I stared at it, then deleted it. They were still watching, still afraid. Good. The flight home was long. I kept my eyes closed most of the way, thinking about the cracked ceilings of the first shelter, the soup Olivia made, the mothers who folded shame into silence just to ask for diapers. I returned to a quiet neighborhood. No reporters, no cameras. But someone had left a basket on Olivia's porch. It had 3 things: a jar of homemade jam, a bundle of socks, and 5 crumpled dollars in an envelope that simply read, "For the next one." The doorbell rang just as I picked it up. A boy stood there, maybe 11. His hoodie was 2 sizes too big. My mom said this place helps people. She didn't come, but I did. I looked at him. Eyes too old for his face, hands balled in fear or maybe shame. I let him in. That afternoon, a woman came by with a grocery bag, then a teacher from the local school, then a grandmother with a loaf of bread. We didn't have a building, but we had chairs and hands and faith. By nightfall, we had 10 people in the living room, a small circle, no speeches, no stages, just the work. The work never left. And neither did I. I kept the photo Olivia gave me in my wallet, carried it like a relic, a reminder, not just of who I was, of who I refused to stop being. They tried to kill me, erase me, break me, but they failed, because I am not a brand, not a figurehead, not a footnote in someone else's story. I am the story, and stories, when told truthfully, do not die. They root, they grow, and I was never a tree. I was the seed. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe. Watch the next one. There's more that needs to be heard. And share this video. Someone out there needs it.